Today begins a series of programs entitled Journeys to Peace, Snapshots of the Israeli-Palestinian Conflict. This segment will cover a part of my journey. I present this because I suspect aspects of it many of you will identify with. We've been transfixed by this conflict for many years now. Hopefully, you will find this introduction and the presentations to follow worthy of your attention. So let's start with my own early impressions of this conflict to give you a sense of how I got from there to here. It all began in the summer of 1967. I was teaching at a summer program for inner-city youth hosted by Oberlin College. Just prior to the start of the program, war broke out in the Middle East. This was billed as the War of Annihilation. The Arab masses were once again threatening the very existence of Israel. Probably as a consequence of that war, a colleague and I included the film Night and Fog in a series for our students. If you have not seen this film, let me recommend that you do so. I believe it is even downloadable on the web. Having been raised and educated in Catholic schools, from elementary to graduate school, I don't recall ever studying the Holocaust. So the images and original film footage captured by this French documentary left a searing impression of what happened in Germany during World War II. One does not easily forget or walk away untouched from such an experience. Since my colleague and I taught in this program for several summers running, we built upon that initial effort and gave the Holocaust a more central role in our curriculum. We eventually ended up working together at a private day school in Canton, Ohio. We continued to expand on the work that we had done in the summer. The first time that we showed the film Night and Fog in Canton, we were joined by the French teacher for that session. Partway through the film, she rushed out of the room in tears. We were, of course, dumbfounded, taken completely by surprise. It was only afterwards that we learned that her father had been taken to a concentration camp during the war. She had grown up in Brussels. She would never see her father again. That experience brought an immediacy to the topic and an incentive to refine our efforts. We introduced Elie Wiesel's classic books, Night and Dawn. In 1973, my wife, 3-year-old daughter, and I left Canton for a year of study in London, England. Even there, the legacy of the Holocaust remained a continuing presence in our lives. A month after our arrival, the Yom Kippur War broke out. The effect of that war was immediately felt. On Oxford Street, a main shopping area in downtown London, there were gas generators out on the sidewalks in order to provide supplemental electricity for the department stores. At the American School of London, where I was doing research for my dissertation, there were weekly bomb threats which necessitated that the school be evacuated. It almost became a routine experience. Meanwhile, back in the United States, the headlines touted long gas lines and unprecedented high prices. In December of that year, we went on a traditional grand tour of Europe, flying first to Rome, Italy. A few days before our arrival at the Rome airport, it was attacked by a group of Islamic extremists. This devastating attack resulted in 32 deaths and 18 wounded. The 5 Arab Muslims who had committed this atrocity eventually made it back to friendly territory and were released with new identities. Our subsequent stops included a stay in Munich. There, we made a point of visiting Dachau, a Nazi concentration camp. Dachau was the first concentration camp for political prisoners. It is unclear how many Jews died there. We also visited the site of the Munich Olympics, where 11 Israeli athletes had been taken hostage and then killed. Much of the public's understanding of this crisis is dominated by 2 sets of images, one being the Holocaust and the other being Arab terrorism. So let's look further at the face of Arab terrorism. The month was September, the year 1970. Members of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine attempted to hijack 4 aircraft simultaneously. They succeeded in hijacking 3 and forced the planes to fly to the Jordanian desert, where the hijackers blew up the aircraft after releasing most of the hostages. The final hostages were released in exchange for 7 Palestinian prisoners. Gal Beckerman, a regular contributor to the Forward, in reviewing this book writes that the Palestinian Fedayeen who hijacked David Raab's plane on September 6, 1970, surely thought they had hit the jackpot. 17-year-old, baby-faced Raab was still so excited from his summer vacation in Israel that he boarded his TWA flight wearing a souvenir Israel Defense Forces uniform, complete with enough general stars to outrank Moshe Dayan. As the group quickly found out, the boy was just a boy, and not even an Israeli. Only an American teenager from the suburbs of Trenton, New Jersey, who wore a knitted yarmulke and would make a valiant effort during the 3 weeks of his captivity to keep kosher. Raab was one of 310 passengers and crew members taken hostage and held in Jordan for the month that has become known as Black September, in which Palestinian fighters tried to overthrow King Hussein. Raab, like all the hostages, survived the ordeal. It may sound insensitive, but in reading Raab's account, Terror in Black September, what struck my post-9/11 eyes was how relatively well the 1970 hostages all seemed to be treated. Having become desensitized to beheadings and suicide bombings, there was almost something quaint in reading about the regular meals of pita and eggs and bananas, the showers and change of clothes. For 2 weeks, Raab was even able to obey the laws of kashrut, and the militants, in his telling, were not entirely unsympathetic characters. Another image that dominated the news during this period was the seizure of Achille Lauro in 1985. 4 Palestinians shot dead an American Jew, Leon Klinghoffer, who was in a wheelchair, and threw his body overboard. His corpse washed ashore several weeks later. For decades, we've been flooded with images of Palestinian terrorism, as well as images of the horror of suicide bombings. Then there were the persistent rocket attacks on Israel. Shown here, a chicken factory that had been hit by one of those rockets. And these were the masked folks who perpetrated these rocket attacks. So is it any wonder that when given the choice between this and this, the world favored Israel? But we were to learn life is rarely what it seems to be.